Good morning, church. We find ourselves in part 4 in our series, God Behind the Scenes in the book of Esther. What an amazing passage it is. What an amazing time it's been so far in this service. So just for people who's not been here or has missed something, we'll recap. And in our recap, we'll say we met a king who wanted to be worshipped. He showed us his power. He showed us his opulence. Then he wanted to bring out his wife and parade his wife in front of all men. And as he brought his wife forward, before he brought his wife forward, she was rejected. He was rejected. He banished her. And then a couple of young guys gave him good advice, go find a replacement. And he went searching for a replacement, and many commentators will say he went through 1,000 young girls before he found the one whose beauty blew him away. And he appointed her as queen. That takes us through from Esther chapter 1 to Esther chapter 2 and verse 18. And as we've caught up this morning, we'll dive into this morning's message, and that's titled, The Silent Sovereignty of God. And I want to ask you this question is, have you ever been punished for doing the right thing? Our outline for this morning is, God is sovereign over recognition and rewards. God is sovereign over honor and dishonor. And God is sovereign over lots and letters. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we gather around your word and we simply ask that you would speak and that we would listen. We do not want to waste any time here, Lord, nor the listeners nor the preacher. So, Father, we pray that your Spirit would descend upon us and there would be holy unction as your word goes forth, and that you would give us ears to hear and to receive. We ask all this in Jesus' name, and the church says, Amen. Right, let's dig in. God is sovereign over recognition and rewards. And I want to start it like this and say, do what is right. And trust that if no one recognizes you or rewards you, God is still keeping record. We don't do things for the recognition of man. And if we are not recognized, God still keeps record of what we're doing. The when of Esther chapter 2, verse 19 to 23 is not clear as the where and the what. After Esther was crowned as queen, there was a second gathering of the virgins. It's not the same virgins, it's a second gathering. And as the second gathering takes place, the author could possibly mean that the virgins who remained in the first harem was taken to the second one, and they were made concubines. But the author could also have meant that even after Esther is chosen as queen, the king commissioned another gathering of virgins. Why would the king do something like this? Is not to give these new virgins the crown, but it was to serve his cravings and satisfy his cravings. And based on what we've observed of this man, this possibility is not a stretch. That he would want his cravings to be served, even though he's found a king. But in this section of the story, there's a glimmer of providence. And the glimmer of providence is found this way. Mordecai is sitting at the king's gate. And the king's gate is where all matters were brought forth and they were judged and weighed. Right? And as Mordecai is sitting there, he hears two eunuchs speak. And these eunuchs are angry at the king. And their plan is to assassinate the king. This sounds like a good movie, right? And as they sit there, they discuss how we can take out the king. You ever watch a movie like that, where the plot is for the king to be taken out? Yeah. Right? So these eunuchs are doing that. And Mordecai catches wind, and this is God's providence. And as he catches wind, he goes to Esther. He says to Esther, hey, there's a plan for someone to kill your husband. Esther, as a good wife, goes to her husband, even though he was busy with the second round of virgins. Providence. She comes in and she says to him, my king, there's a plot against you. Now there's something interesting that happens in this chapter. The king investigates. This is the first time the king actually says, there's word given to me. Let me check out if this is true. It's the first time. It took us 3 chapters for the king to come to his senses to investigate stuff. Why didn't he do this when his wise men told him, banish Vashti? And now he investigates. And as he investigates, the matter is found that it's true. There are 2 traitors. Now we can see the king's power on display. When he showed us 127 provinces, that's not power yet. Now he shows us his power. He says, I'll make an example of these 2 eunuchs. And he hangs them at the gallows. And some translations will say they were impaled on a stake. So the king made an example of these 2 men. The question we should ask is, why would Esther and Mordecai save a pagan king? And of all the details of their efforts, the king records that 2 Jews looked after me in his chronicles, not chronicles of the Bible, his chronicles. So for history's sake, when the next king comes in, you'll be able to read what has happened before me. So he records that. Then we ask again, why would Esther and Mordecai, 2 Jews in this story, help save the life of a pagan king? A pagan, self-glorifying and woman-abusing king. Why would you do that? Why? Why would Esther and Mordecai act on the king's behalf? Many people say maybe Mordecai was afraid of what would happen to Esther in either the assassination attempt or a successful overthrow of the king. Because at the end of the day, her life is at risk if these guys' plan comes to fruition. So Mordecai acts as the caregiver of Esther, and he says, man, let's tell the king because I'm protecting you, not the king. But all that is just speculation. The author does not tell us why Esther and Mordecai did what they did. He just tells us they saved the king. And that's a good segue for us to see that Paul tells the church at Galatia in Galatians chapter 6 and verse 10, as we have opportunity, let us work for the good of all. The ESV will say for the good of everyone, especially those who belong to the household of faith. Let us work for the good of everyone, whether they saved or unsaved. Every opportunity we get, let us do good for them. As we interact with our neighbors, our co-workers, the doctors, the mechanics, the plumbers, and whoever else the Lord brings into our paths this week, their good should be our goal. The question is, are their good or is their good our goal? Do we work in such a way for the good of everyone else? And I love how Paul says it. He says, especially for those who belong to God. So it doesn't cut out those who don't belong, but there's an emphasis that for us here in this building who all love Jesus and serve Jesus, we ought to look out for one another. But it doesn't stop there. It goes further. It says, even for those who don't know me, look out for them. Now I'd ask you this, and don't answer loud, please. Do we only do good when it benefits us? Or do we only do good when it's my favorite person? Right? Because then it's easy. Or I'm going to do good because if I do good for Brazil, he'll owe me a favor. And I'll cash that favor in due time. Right? But Paul doesn't say do good only to those you like and for those you want to cash in a favor for. Right? He says do good for all. So every situation we find ourselves in this week, whoever crosses our path, their good is our goal. Whether it's the boss that tramples on you at work, his good or her good is your goal. Because that's the call that God has given to his children. That's why Esther and Mordecai can look after the pagan king. Because his good is their goal. Furthermore, Jeremiah 29 and verse? No, guys, I can see how you read your Bible. And verse 7, right? Verse 7, amazing verse, guys. Leave verse 11, man. If you don't understand verse 7, verse 11 is never going to make sense. And verse 7 says it like this, and it says, but seek the welfare, the well-being of the city where I have sent you in exile. We are in exile in this world. Seek the well-being of the city. And pray to the Lord on its behalf for its welfare or well-being. You will find your welfare or well-being. Not the plans I have for you are plans to prosper you. Seek the well-being of the city. Now you might sit here and ask me, how would I seek the well-being? You are placed in a particular location. God is sovereign over recognition and rewards. You are placed in a certain location, not even in your workplace, where you live, right? Do you seek the well-being of that place? Greater scheme. We in Ikuruleni, do we seek the well-being? Greater scheme. Do we seek the well-being of Gauteng? Greater scheme. Do we seek the well-being of our nation? As exiles, wherever we go, we should be seeking the well-being of the city. So they would know that this is recorded, and they would say, for the well-being of the 127 provinces, we ought to do good for the king, whether it benefits us or not. The question again this morning for us is, are we seeking the well-being of the area God has placed us in? Or are we just there complaining every day? We should be seeking the well-being. And then God is sovereign over honor and dishonor. We find that in chapter 3, verse 1 to 6. A non-biblical proverb says, no good deed goes unpunished. In Mordecai's case, what happens next describes a statement of kicking a man while he's down or pouring salt into his wounds. Because what is said next, we see the lineage of Haman. And to Mordecai, that's just crazy. Why? Now in the story, guys, now the plot is thickening. Because the antagonist of the story is finally introduced. It's taken us 3 chapters to meet the antagonist of the story. This is where the movie gets good, man. Right? And how is he introduced? He's introduced as Haman the Agagite. Done. No long stories, nothing. But for us who's reading this story, in the opening verse of chapter 3, all of us are expecting the king to promote Mordecai. That's how you read a story, right? He's done good. The king ought to do good for him. Funny enough, chapter 3 opens with the antagonist. It says, here's Haman. He's promoted to second in charge in the kingdom. That's the king's right-hand man. If I'm Mordecai, comes out of me. It's not good words of Haman. Who is he? Sounds familiar, eh? You do all the good work at work. Right? And the boss finds someone outside the company to promote and not you. But I've been doing this. I've been acting. All that feelings you feel when they look over you is probably what Mordecai is feeling. This is mine. Sometimes we're too entitled. It's not ours. God places us where He wants us for the season. So in this section, we meet this guy, and Haman's introduction forms an unexpected twist to the story because there's a sub-theme that's flowing now. And the sub-theme is the conflict between Mordecai and Haman. And it's a thing about respect commanded and respect refused. Interpreters throughout the ages have offered explanations of why Mordecai refused to honor Haman. My first view is Mordecai wanted the position. That's Ewan's view, right? Ewan's view in reading the story is this. Mordecai says, he's got my position. I saved the king. I should sit there. Sounds familiar, guys. Don't make it sound far. This story is very close to home, right? Because sometimes we speak of people who get things we think we should have got. Right? That's Ewan's interpretation. Other sources would say, in general, Jews did not bow to pagan officials in the Persian court. Another one, this is the ones who want to defend Mordecai very quickly. They want to exonerate him. And how they exonerate his behavior is by finding a religious motive, saying, oh, Mordecai is this Jew. Jews don't bow down. They find this, that there's a God. We don't worship other gods. Great. But others suggest Haman wore an emblem of an idol on his garment, and Mordecai refused to pay homage. But I want to introduce to you, like I introduced last week, in Hebrew narrative, the characteristics described when a character is introduced is key to understanding his role. Esther was described last week, young and beautiful. And that tells us what her role is going to be like. This week, we want to change that and say, oh, it's Haman. No. Mordecai shouldn't bow because Haman is not a god. No. There's key details in the text as to when Haman is introduced as an Agagite. Mordecai, when he was introduced, wasn't introduced as a wise man. You can check it. Esther chapter 2 and verse 5, one page back. Go there, guys. I don't hear the Bible turn. He wasn't introduced as a wise man, nor was Mordecai introduced as an official of the court, right? But he was introduced as a Jew from the tribe of Benjamin. Gives his character, who he is, what role he's going to play. So when these two are identified, the author implies that there's a relationship of enmity. Why? The Jews and the Agagitites, or the Jews and the Amalekites, is mirrored in the personal relationship between Mordecai and Haman. The original readers to this chapter would expect conflict and they'd expect aggression. You can go back to Exodus chapter 17 and see conflict and aggression when it comes to the Amalekites and God's people. Why does this happen? Agag was king of the Amalekites. At the time, Saul, also from the tribe of Benjamin, was the first king of Israel. God gave Saul an instruction. He said, wipe out the Amalekites, totally. But Saul took Agag. He spared his life. Saul went further and he kept the best of the best, the sheep, the cattle. He kept all of that. Saul disobeyed God. Right? The original readers again would have understood, here's another episode of an old age conflict coming forward. We in for another blockbuster war. This guy is not going to hold back, nor is Mordecai going to hold back. And I want you to see how interesting this is. As Haman's going to do what he does it out of a position of pride. He does it out of, hey, you didn't bow, everybody else did. I'm going to show you what I do to you. And when he does it, he says, I'm not only going to do it to you, I'm going to do it to your people. What did the people do to deserve the punishment? They were going about their business as usual. Right? So this conflict brews between the Amalekites and Israel. And it's not new. It's not new, guys. I want to say this. Haman's reaction should cause us to consider how we react when people do not recognize the greatness we perceive in ourselves. Right? When we do what we do when people do not honor us, how do we feel when people don't honor us? Right? How do we feel? Haman is feeling that. Couple of questions. Are we seeking, or are we in any way guilty of seeking our honor over God's? Are we seeking our honor to the detriment of those around us? Are we seeking, or are we more offended when our honor is impugned than when God's is? Honor was due to Ahasuerus because he was king, even though he was not an honorable man. Right? And he demanded it be given to Haman. So if the king says, that guy deserves the same honor given to me, we all should abide. Mordecai doesn't. Honor should be given. And how honor should be given for us here today, we'd say, we don't have an Ahasuerus over us, nor do we have a Haman. Paul writes in Romans chapter 13 from verse 1 to 7 how we ought to honor leaders and government above us. Peter echoes that in 1 Peter 2 from verse 13 to 17, how we should submit to authorities and show them honor, whether honorable or not. Our duty as children of God is to honor. Now I ask you the question, are you honoring the government above you? Are we giving honor? We God's children, guys. Are we giving honor? Because God's call to us is to honor those, whether they are honorable or not. He is sovereign over honor and dishonor. And I will show it like this. A simple example is, the reason we battle to honor government or any leaders above us, whether it's in our work, at home, or wherever it is because we don't know how to honor in the church. If we don't get it right here, we're never going to look out there. And if we're doing it out there but not in here, there's a problem. Question is, are we honoring the way God is calling us to honor? Because God doesn't tell us, oh, if he's unsaved, don't honor him. Right? The question is, do we honor? Do we pay homage? Or do we just say what good job we can do in the place of President Ramaphosa? Because one day I'll put you in his office if God so gives me permission to, and then we see how you run the country. Right? And then when you make a blunder, which we see, we always see the blunders. We never see the good. We always just see the errors. Has there been any good out of presidency? You all say no. Pay honor, guys. There must be good that's happening. I don't see us having to meet under a rock with a security guard outside because they want to kill us. There's good. You can't see it because all you see is the potholes, the tax, the fuel, the this, the that. Pay honor. Are you honoring him? Oh, it's petrol again. It's tax again. Guys, we should give to Caesar what's due to him. Why are we complaining? Oh no, it's less money in my pocket. Shows how selfish we are. It's because it impacts me. Paul said, do good for all. Are we withholding honor from anyone to who it is due? If so, are we withholding it more out of convenience than conviction? Is it because we want to follow our preferences rather than the Lord's precepts? How are we paying honor? Then the story gets interesting because God is sovereign over lots and letters. Remember that no matter what his enemies plan, God will always preserve his people. This plan goes in 3 phases, or 2 phases and a genocide. Phase 1 is Haman's plan was to set a date when the genocide will take place. He doesn't have the king's permission yet. He's just got the plan. And he sits with his guys, and on what do they rely? They rely on something called pur, and that's known as a lot. And in case many of us is wondering what a pur is, when you play board games, you don't say pass the pur, right? You say pass the dice, right? So pur or lots it's like a dice, our contemporary form of a dice. So they were rolling dice there as they were casting their lots to figure out what the date is, right? And they get in there. And through casting the lots, those gathered with Haman were able to determine that the 12th month would be the most favorable month on which we slaughter the Jews. But that's good. They are in the first month. You read it now. We are only in the first month. But the lots they cast say the 12th month. It's time. Watch God working, guys. Watch him working. Proverbs chapter 16 and 33. Let's go there. I want to show you who's in charge of all lots. It's one we don't read. Right? Proverbs 16:33 will say, the lot is cast into the lap, but it's every decision is from the Lord. So even as Haman rolls the dice to cast lots, when that date comes up and says it's the 12th, every decision is from the Lord. The date discerned by Haman, therefore, came not from the discretion of their God, small g, but from the direction of the God we serve, the creator of the heavens and the earth. Clear evidence of God's grace is that while Haman began scheming during the first month of the year, the massacre was scheduled for the 12th month. Guys, if the lot fell on the next day, then there would have been a genocide. But God is sovereign over lots. And how is he sovereign over lots? As you were rolling, that dice fell on 12. And as that dice fell on that particular month, I, as God, have 11 months to work. I've got a time period, right? And for many of us who love gifts, between this birthday and next year's birthday is a very long wait. Would you agree? Yes. For children who look forward to Christmas, from January to December is a very long wait. Yes. Right? Would you agree with me that you can say in that time period a lot can happen? Yes. Right? Yeah. So a lot can happen in this time. And on the date that it was confirmed, Haman's got the 12th month. Now Haman has to go to phase 2 to convince the king. Guys, Haman's plan has started without even speaking to the king yet. Right? He's got the date, he's got the plan, he knows what he wants to do. But he's never spoken to the king yet. So Haman comes to the king, and I think it's verse 7. And when he comes to the king, he approaches the king to annihilate an entire ethnic group in the king's empire. One would hope it would be difficult, if not impossible, to say, King, we're going to kill a whole group in your empire. We would think the king would come to his senses, as in chapter 2, and I think verse 20-something, he says, let's investigate the matter, right? In chapter 3, the king doesn't investigate the matter. The king listens. And Haman is a very shrewd and smart guy, because how he convinces the king, he uses general statements. He says, there is a group out there in your 127 provinces. Their laws are not yours, my king. They also do not listen to you, my king. Or they will bring an uproar in the kingdom. My king, we have to assassinate them. All the king heard there is my kingdom. There's a group out there that's going to overthrow me. Haman, yeah, that idea is a good one. Tell me more. And then Haman moves from general to specific. Because what Haman says is, my king, I will give you silver. I will place it in your treasury. I think it's what, 10,000 talents? Right? I will place it in the king's treasury if my plan is approved. This promise is also bogus. Right? Why would Ahasuerus say yes to this? It's not because of the silver, or maybe it is. And why it would be, we see now, Chris, we've gone year 3, year 7, we're now at year 12. Right? So if we're in year 12, we have to see what Ahasuerus was up to at this time. And at this time, history says it this way. It says, Ahasuerus was rebuilding stuff in the empire. The stuff his dad Darius didn't complete, that he saw fit to complete. So he went on a whole building expedition. And as he went on this, the treasury was depleting. Here comes a guy and says, I will give you 10,000 talents. My brother, wipe them out. I can continue building. Right? That's what the king is saying. One author that I read, His book is titled The Inconspicuous Providence of God in the book of Esther. He says, the bribe that Haman promised is something he will never be able to deliver. But the king apparently does not realize this. Why? Because the king is just thinking of his projects. Oh, that 10,000 talents can do so much. Haman's bribe would have been between a half and 2/3 of the entire empire's annual tax revenue. That's a lot. And unless Haman had an uncle named Johann Rupert or Nicky Oppenheimer, unless he had an uncle like that, maybe he could. Or if Haman had Scrooge McDuck as his uncle, maybe he could pay that. Right? He probably did not have access to such funds. The king, who apparently was the most easiest influenced and most powerful person in the history of the world, told Haman, here's my ring. That's power. Because Haman can now add anything he wants to add to the story. I've got the ring. The king isn't concerned with what I'm going to write or what I'm going to say. He's approved. And now I have his ring to send out these decrees. Guys, it should jar us how easily a plan to eliminate an entire ethnic group of people was proposed and proclaimed. Least we think this was just a problem in the ancient world. Remember the genocide in Darfur, in Rwanda, in Bosnia, in Cambodia, in Syria, and dare we not leave out the Holocaust. That's modern day genocides. Right? At the heart of each of these tragedies is one ethnic group seeking to exercise its self-perceived and self-proclaimed superiority over another. And that's what Haman is doing. He's saying, I as an Agathite is more superior than all the Jews in 127 provinces. I want to say, as much as God is at work in this story, God's enemy, Satan, is also at work at this very point in time in the story. As much as Haman comes up with this hellish influence to wipe out the Jews, Satan is using Haman to wipe out the lineage of Jesus Christ. You ought to see it, guys, because if Haman's plan comes to fruition, there's no Jesus. So Satan is using Haman to do his work. But at the same time, God is working. So as much as the enemies are rising, God is also working. And the next phase of Haman's demonic plan was to draft the most heinous decree in history. And I love how the story writes, because it says he wrote it in every language, meaning everybody understands what's going to happen. There is no excuse saying, oh, that's not my language. No, it's in your language. Here it is, read it. It's translated into every script and language used in the empire. Haman wanted those he was targeting to know there's no place to hide. Furthermore, Haman wanted those to know, I'm coming for you. Whether you like it or not, there's nothing you can do, I'm coming. This is a good plot. We've got a great antagonist rising. What do we do in moments like this? Wherever the Jews would go, all of them would know our time is coming to an end. In the 12th month, on this day, Haman is coming. Right? And to guard against the lack of clarity, Haman uses verbs, destroy, kill, and annihilate, to convey how passionately he wants the job done. So this message would go to the people in the empire, and Haman would be telling them, on this day, we assassinate, not even, we annihilate and we wipe out all the Jews. So if your neighbor's a Jew, kill him. That's the decree. Now guys, if we sit in here and the second in command tells us that, what do? I'm putting us on the side of the antagonist now. What do? Hey, you know, I saw Corey Craft's truck come in there in that house. Yeah, they've got nice furniture there. You see the heart of covetousness come out now? If I assassinate him, Haman said, whatever's there is mine. That's a good plan. Yeah, I'll take the keys, right? It's mine. On the other side is, if we are God's people, how do we feel reading a decree that's going to say, I'm about to annihilate and wipe you out, and I'm about to destroy you? How do we feel in that time? On the day, the Jews would have been preparing for God's deliverance. Remember, Haman writes the decree on the 13th of the first month. The Jews are preparing for the 14th of the first month. Passover takes place. And on that day, this is happening. The Jews are preparing to remind themselves of how God delivered his people. Providence. And this is amazing. They get this decree saying, you're going to die. But at the same time, they are busy preparing, saying, you have came through before. Yeah. Certainly, some of the Jews would have been led to pray. Yeah. And what they would have been praying is, God, our death has been decreed. We are in need of you. Deliver us once again. Does that sound familiar? Yes. We are maybe finding ourselves in an 11-month waiting period. Are we anxious that God is not moving, God is not hearing, or God is not working? The Jews could say, Lord, we preparing. Deliver us once again. Is that our prayer this morning? Oh Lord, help us once again. Here's a song, it goes, it says, I see you move. You've moved the mountains. And I believe I'll see you do it again. Do we have that faith in our waiting period that I've seen you orchestrate things in my life? I'll see you do it again. Because the Israelites now is desperate. We're going to die. Oh Lord, deliver us again. To do anything to the Jews, Haman did not need the king's permission, but he needed God's permission to destroy God's people. He went to the wrong king to ask permission. Haman proposed silver, bought a decree, but it could not buy the demise of God's people. Neither the silver given to the king nor the silver coins given to Judas could thwart God's purposes. All bribes in the world will never be able to stop God from providing his son with a bride, that is the church. All the amount of silver paid for your demise cannot happen. If you are a child of God, he will preserve you. He is faithful. Even in the darkest of darkest valleys, he is leading us to the greener of greener pastures. Haman then moves to the second aspect, and that's timing. I want us to consider that God gives 11 months. Remember, lots are by his direction. And he gives 11 months of waiting for God's people. And they'd be experiencing anxiety. They'd be knowing that, boy, we're going to die. Imagine we lived like that today, knowing tomorrow, hey, we're one day closer to death. Which is true. We are one day closer to death. Right? But we live as though we're not going to die. We must stop watching these kind of movies. Change the movies. Watch movies where people die. Right? God's people didn't know how it will turn out. They also didn't have God's full plan. And sometimes we ought to think like this. We are in a season of waiting or darkness or whatever it is you find yourself in. I don't know, but I myself am in such a period, right? But what I'm reminded of is I don't need to have the blueprint to understand God's going to work. All I need to do is say, Lord, deliver me once again. Lord, only you can show up. Unfortunately, sometimes we lose hope because we don't see. You know why we don't see? It's because our eyes are on the wrong things. Take your eye off the recognition, the rewards, the what's coming, the what I deserve. Take your eyes off that and place your eyes on the King. And as you watch the King, watch him work. He doesn't need to tell us how the story is going to end. Just know he'll preserve his people. And how does he write this to us? Because I done a diagnosis. I thought I was a doctor when I read this, Don. Right? And I done a diagnosis. And my diagnosis said, in this time, even the most faithful believer had anxiety. We anxious, right? But Peter gives us a great reminder, and that's why keep your eyes on God at all times. Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7, he says, cast your cares on God because he cares for you. So no matter how long you're waiting, no matter how many times you're knocking, no matter how dark it's getting, cast your cares on God. Don't cast your cares on the guy you know that can solve the problem. Cast your care on the King of the universe who's orchestrating things for your good and his glory. Turn your Bibles to Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 17 and 18. Great verse. We'll read till 19, and it says, though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of oil of olive fail, and the fields yield no food. The flocks be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Oh, how would we respond if there's nothing like that? Would it be like Habakkuk? The next line is key. Habakkuk says, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on my high places. Even though it's doom and gloom in our situations, do we rejoice in the God of our salvation? Even though it's doom and gloom in our salvation, do we take joy in the God that created me, the God that saved me? Do I find joy there? Because that is where we find peace. That even though it's messed up, we live in a broken world, it's messed up. Lord, I rejoice in you. Can we say that this morning? That there's nothing, but I rejoice in you. And in our times of waiting, we can become empowered to trust the Lord, not by considering our previous faithfulness, but recalling His. He is always working in our waiting, even if it is not always evident. I think of the life of Joseph, sold by his brothers, being a slave, tempted by Potiphar, thrown into prison, gets promoted after that. He comes out. He saves Israel at this point in time. And his words to his brothers are, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. To bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. It doesn't matter how the story starts. It also doesn't matter what it looks like in the middle. I know the end. Because in the end, we will meet in another garden. We will have a banquet. Have you read that? It's a good book, Revelation. Right? And we will spend time with Him forever. So what the devil works for evil, God orchestrates for good. Then Romans chapter 8 and verse 28, I just think it's a fulfillment of that verse. And it says, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. For those who are called according to His purpose. 11 months of darkness, things work out for the good of those He calls. 11 months of darkness, people think it's evil, but God is orchestrating it for good. Make no mistake, in Esther 2, chapter 2, 19 to 35, God's people found themselves in the same position we always find ourselves in since the Garden of Eden. A decree of death hangs over us from which we cannot deliver ourselves. Though Haman used money to purchase the death, God uses Christ's death to purchase life. No greater price has been paid for liberation, and at that price has been paid in full. As dark as it is in this world today, Jesus paid it all. As challenging as it is in your situation, rejoice in the God of your salvation. As gloom as it looks in the world out there, God is working things for the good of those He loves.